right, my name is Marc Lassard. I'm 35 years old, I'm 34. I'll be 35 in 12 days, so almost 35. I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, and I'm married. I have 2 children, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. Most embarrassing memories is from first grade. I had a lot of memories from school. I loved going to school. And my teacher, she was amazing. And I remember one day my mom came to pick me up early, and I ran to my mom and she said, aren't you going to say goodbye, to your teacher? And I was like, oh yeah. And I ran back and I kissed her on the lips, like how when you, when you say goodbye to your mom, when you're a little kid, you usually kiss her on the lips. And I kissed my teacher on the lips, and I was so embarrassed. Like, I quickly just turned and ran back to my mom. And, I always thought that was funny. Other than, I think that's the more positive side or the funny side, other than me usually throwing chairs across the classroom in first grade just because I was hungry.
Oh.
My teacher would always say, could you send Mark to school with some more snacks? He gets hungry. I think I invented the term hangry before it was a thing. As far as good memories go, I wouldn't say my mom was ever really, funny. But she loves like nobody else loves. And, you would never question that she loves you. And we saw that through her sacrifice as a single mother. Working 3 jobs, doing everything she could to, just provide us a home and a roof over our head. When I was like 14, I started mowing lawns and doing whatever I needed to be able to just buy shirts for myself, to have clothes to go to school, just to help my mom out. But yeah, she sacrificed a lot. And I remember she took me and my brother and my cousin it was either NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, when they were like popular. Yeah.
I can edit that out if you want.
No, it's all right. We were like 7 years old or something like that, 6 or 7 years old. And this was before she had lost her like corporate job. And that was kind of her love language. She does it through gifts, through acts of service, and you'll never question how much she loves you. Usually my brother and I wanted anything game related, or back then Pokemon was big. There's this thing, I don't know if you ever heard of it or played it, it's called Pogs.
Yes.
And Pogs. So usually she would get us, Pokemon cards, Pogs, or I remember when the Dreamcast came out and they had the NFL 2K.
Yeah.
That was huge. And yeah, when she got us that was like, man, dream come true, Christmas present. We were so happy. We played that thing nonstop for days. And I grew up in Connecticut, so during that time, you're off from school, it's snow days, so you can't go anywhere. You're in the house playing video games. I have an older brother who's a year and a half older, so close in age, very competitive, playing video games. So yeah, that was probably one of the best Christmas presents. And I would say one of the funniest stories related around Christmas, we have a tradition in our family that we would wake up at midnight, on Christmas Day, as soon as it's Christmas, and open gifts then, and then like go back to sleep. And and one Christmas, I don't know, I was probably like 11 or 12. My mom was like, go downstairs and get grandma, and so she can come upstairs and we can open presents, because we lived in a 2-story home and my grandma lived on the first floor. And I go downstairs and, I'm still tired, and I have my hoodie on and I have my head on the table. And because my grandma was in the I went to her room. She wasn't there. She was in the bathroom. So I was waiting for her to come out. And as soon as she comes out, she's naked. And I was like, Grandma! Oh. And yeah, that was not a wonderful sight to see, but funny nonetheless. Yeah, my mom's name is Karen Garcia. That's her marriage name. She lives in Naugatuck, Connecticut. She still lives there in Connecticut. She moved from Danbury, where we grew up, to Naugatuck after my grandmother had passed away. And yeah, I love her to death. My brother's name is Gary Lassard. He was named after our grandfather. He is 36. I remember one time we stole my grandfather's compound bow, and we found this we found this sofa in the woods, across the street from us, behind these condominiums, and we thought it would be a great idea to get the bow, wrap a paper towel around it, douse it in gasoline, put gasoline on the couch, light it on fire, and shoot a flaming arrow.
That is a great idea. What are you talking about, you thought?
And we had this little tiny kitchen fire extinguisher that, us and our 11-year-old, however old the minds thought would work well against a flaming couch. Obviously it didn't. And we just ran away, and someone called the fire department. They came and put it out, thankfully, and they figured out where we lived and came and paid us a visit and said, you're lucky you guys are young, because we would charge you with arson and all this other stuff. And we didn't go to the same high school, actually. My brother was, I would say I was very smart about doing dumb things. He got caught more often, and spent some time in the streets, doing some things to earn money. And but yeah, he was, always looked out for me, for sure, as my older brother. We loved to play basketball together. We had a basketball hoop in the driveway, so we'd always play basketball. He loved working on cars. I pretty much learned everything I know from him. He would, in that 2000, late 2000 era, everybody wanted to, have the import tuner. So, he got a Integra and dropped the motor out and put an H22 in it and did, what everybody's looking to do and be Tokyo Drift, back then. So that was something we shared. But I was always, he liked the mechanical side. I always liked the flashy things. I put the subwoofers in my car and did the electrical and the wiring and everything, and which makes sense because now I do electrical engineering. So yeah, Gary, I love you. I'm just so grateful for how far we've come together as brothers, how far you've come, and I love you very much. Yeah, I'm not sure. My parents got divorced when I think I was like 2 or 3 years old. The night my mom met my dad, she got pregnant with my older brother, and my dad, he immigrated from Quebec, so even though it's not someone coming from like Iraq or some third world country, Canada's still doing well. I'm still a first generation American, and he came here when he was 20. After his father had passed away. He was just trying to, figure his own life out. So they were both young, got pregnant with my brother, and tried to make it work. And thankfully they did, because they got married, and, I was the second kid out of them trying to make it work. So I'm very grateful for that. The divorce was kind of, they would fight a lot and kind of put me and my brother in between it. And it taught us at a very early age to lie and, to the people closest to you, which kind of stuck with me for a long time. My mom did well for herself until she lost her job, and then we struggled for a long time. I'd probably say from the age of 8 to 14, when I could start mowing lawns and stuff like that. And my brother and I, we fought a lot, he was always bigger than me, a little bit heavier, so he'd just sit on me and I couldn't do anything, and, but that's how brothers are. But school and sports was always, kind of a safe haven for me. I started playing football in, I think it was 5th grade, and looking back on it, my dad remarried, and my stepmom, I have 2 stepsisters and 3 stepbrothers. But basically they were playing football, and my dad and my stepmom had said to my mom, hey, they're playing football. Do you want to get the boys involved? I think the main reason I wanted to do it was because I felt that my dad had chosen this family over ours, and that he loved them more than my brother and I. And so maybe if I did this thing, if I played football, that he would love me more, right? So I'm pretty sure that's why, I started playing football. I grew to love it, and I played football at Palomar College after the Marine Corps. After that, goes into rugby, but that kind of got me into sports when I was younger. But my true passion was basketball. I always loved playing basketball when I was younger. I still play to this day. Things come out of, pain and necessity usually. I do have a relationship with my stepbrothers. So the oldest is Lisa Petzold. That's her husband's last name. I believe she is, I want to say somewhere around 45. She lives in Connecticut, 2 daughters and a son. And then Christina Blue, she has 5 children, 2 sons that are adults now, and then 3 younger ones, all with the same husband. I was like, you guys are free and you decided to start over again. She's probably, somewhere 41, 42, somewhere around there, is the third, but the oldest of the boys. He's around 40, still living in Connecticut. And then Joey, Michael Vedrano, Joey Vedrano, Anthony Vedrano, that's their father's last name. Joey lives in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the president was, the attempted assassination of the president. It's funny, I think we were there a week before that. We went there for like a minister's conference visiting him. And then Anthony lives in, Joey's my age, so 34, about to be 35. And Anthony is 30, I believe, or 31. And he lives in North Carolina, where my dad and my stepmom are. Yeah, I love Michael, I love Joey, I love Anthony. We still have family get-togethers whenever we can, and I think we're actually planning one for this Thanksgiving for all of us to get into one place to do like a little family reunion. I've known you guys since we're 3-4 years old, so we basically grew up like biological brothers and sisters, and I see you guys that way, and I love you guys. When I was in high school, I was doing architecture. I was taking an architecture class, and I really liked it. And I went and looked at New York Institute of Technology, but it was $50,000 a year for 5 years. And I was like, there's no way I'm going $250,000 into debt. My family, has no money. There's no way I'm going to pay for this. I'll have to take out loans or something. So that kind of led me looking towards the military, as well as my grandfather served in Vietnam. And my grandmother's brother served in Vietnam. They're both Marines. So, it was already in the family. And honestly, I was driving home from work one day. I worked in Richfield, Connecticut at a pizza shop. And usually I would bring weed with me to sell before or after work or whatever the case is. And one day a cop pulls me over for following too close to the car in front of me. But I was like 100 feet at least behind this car. Like, obviously it was some bull to just have an excuse to pull me over. A minute later, the K9 unit shows up, and they have this dog sniffing around my car. This one day I didn't bring anything with me to work. I had nothing on me. And I had just forgot it. And the cops were, it seemed like they were kind of pissed that, the dog didn't react. So they kind of like agitated the dog a little bit to like hit my door. And then they were like, all right, get out of the car, and, pulled me out of the car and had me on the hood of their car for, at least 30 minutes to an hour, it was like February in Connecticut, cold weather, it's 10 and 11 p.m. And they just stripped my car. Like, they almost busted my subwoofers, open, because I had them like ported inwards to try and, see if I had anything like hidden in there. thankfully they didn't, but stripped the panels, everything off the car, and then afterwards they're like, all right, you're free to go. And at that point I was like, at least give me the ticket for falling too close or something. But I took that as a sign, like, if I keep going down the route I'm going, this isn't going to end well. Like, the cops are obviously like watching me, following me, and I just got rid of everything and made the choice. I had already been thinking about the Marine Corps, and I made the choice at that point that, I had to get out of Connecticut. I had to get out of, that life. Oh, man. Well, the day before that, I think, or 2 days before that, right, they drive you up to the MEP station, so, which is military something processing station. This one was in Massachusetts, so my recruiter, I remember saying bye to my family, drives me up, and, I used to smoke cigarettes, so that night I'm out in the gazebo at, this like hotel that they have you on, this MEP station, and, I light a cigarette, and I remember looking up at the stars and just thinking to myself, like, what did I just get myself into? Like that just moment of like solitude, processing like what I'm about to go through, and just thinking like, what did I just do? And then I was like, well, I'm here. There's no going back. Might as well go full speed and just, own it. And so, yeah, they fly you down and to whatever airport. I went to boot camp in South Carolina. Depending on where you grow up, half the country goes to MCRD here in San Diego. They take you to this room in the airport, have you empty all your stuff into a bag and go through all the stuff you brought with you, and give you a little bag of personal items that you like turn into someone when you get to boot camp. And they put you on a bus and tell you to put your head down, and the windows are all tinted, and put your head down and close your eyes. They drive you to the base, and then drill instructor comes on, starts, yelling instructions to you. You get off the bus, you get on the footsteps, you go through the double doors, and it's basically 3 days of just, they keep you awake for 3 days, and it's just inbounding. So this is what you're going to do. You go to this phone, you call your parent, hey, I'm alive, hang up the phone, basically, just so they know you're there. And they give you a drug test and give you all your equipment. And then on the third day, I'm going to expose a little military secret here, or I guess a recruitment secret. On the third day, they go through your enlistment paperwork, and they'll say, first person goes up and says, it says here on your 16th birthday that you smoked weed experimentally, is that true? And the person says yes. And then, 30 people go by saying the same thing, because I guess there's some loophole that if you just say you did drugs once, you don't have to go through this whole waiver process, that if you just did it once experimentally, then they're like, all right, whatever, we'll just accept this person. And that's what they do. And the Marine Corps has this, it's USMC, right? And there's this acronym that they say for, it's Uncle Sam's Misguided Children, which, in a way is true. It's a lot of guys who grew up without fathers, or broken homes, or drugs or alcohol, things like that you need a good fatherly figure, or a good, discipline kind of institution to set them straight. And it does a great job of doing that. After the rifle range, you get fitted for your dress blues, and they have you go to the bathroom to see how it looks. And I'm in the bathroom, and I'm feeling myself. I'm like, man, this looks good. And I go out, and I'm back in the line, and for whatever reason, I started dancing, like, just like feeling myself. And then out of the corner of my eye, I can see my senior drill instructor seeing me. And man, you never seen someone snap to attention so fast. I turned around, and he goes, hey, mother effer. And they didn't even have to say your name. Who they were calling. And I turned around, I was like, I was like, aye, sir. And he's like, get over here. And, you know, I run over. He's like, do it again, you know, B. And I was like, all right. And, you know, and so I do this like stupid dance. And he calls over the heavy hat and he's like, you know, drill instructor Sergeant Butler. And he comes over and he's like, do it again. And I dance. And then he calls the next one over, drill instructor Sergeant Henry. He comes over and has me do it again. And then he's like, I want this mother effer dead. And, you know, just the looks on their face, and the next hour and a half that we were there, man, the only thing going through my head, I'm like, I'm dying today. Like, I'm literally gonna die today. This is my last day. And so we go back to the squad bay, and we're practicing, you know, combat aid. You know, someone gets shot in the chest and they have a sucking chest wound, you know, like low crawling and taking care of that. But they had me low crawling the distance of the squad bay, elbows and toes. And once I got to one side, I'd have to go on my elbows and my heels and go back. And I had this, you know, I did this for probably like 30 minutes on cement. And eventually the senior drill instructor comes out, has us all line up. And, you know, because we're getting ready to go to evening chow. He tells us to go outside, you know, get in formation, and I'm just about to cross the threshold of the door. And Sergeant Butler's like, hey, mother effer, where do you think you're going? And I was like, nowhere, sir. And, you know, and I came back in the squad bay, and, you know, they all went formed up and went to chow. And he destroyed me for like the next 2 hours in you know, we have this thing called a scuzz brush. It's like this little brush that we'd use to clean the deck with. He would make me frog walk. So I'd start on one side of the squad bay, and you'd push the brush just like a couple inches, and then you'd have to step with one, you know, you're squatted down, you know, like all the way squatted down. You'd have to lift one leg up till your knee went past your ear, take a step forward, and then do it with the other one until I went all the way to the other side of the squad bay. And then he'd be like, now dance, and I'd have to get up and dance, turn around, move 1 inch over, and then go back. And then eventually when I finished the whole thing, he had me do, we call them NASCAR, so you're just bent over at the waist, and you push the brush, and you run. And I remember like halfway through, man, I would just be like shaking, like violently, crying, everything. Like my body was like, literally like destroyed. And I'm pretty sure they do that at some point. They do that to everybody in boot camp, because what their main goal is to push you to a level or past a limit that to a level that you don't know that you have. A lot of people aren't aware of what their body is capable of doing, or what they're capable of doing intellectually, physically, because they're limited by their own mindset. And yeah, that broke something in me that day in a good way, knowing that I'm able to do much more than, you know, I thought I was. No, so boot camp is at Parris Island, South Carolina, and then here in San Diego, it's Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, and Camp Lejeune is more of a duty station. So like Camp Pendleton is here, Camp Lejeune would be the same thing, but for the East Coast. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Everything that they teach you in the Marine Corps is to build discipline, to build character, to build, you know, self-sufficiency, to build an understanding of the necessity of teamwork, to such a greater level that, you know, you understand that if you don't do your job to the best of your ability, the next guy next to you can die. It's not just a failure or something won't work or go right. That's someone's life. I remember going to the recruiter's office and saying I wanted to go infantry because I wanted to go to Afghanistan and kill people, you know, and fight for my country. And, you know, I scored a 98 on my ASVAB. Yeah. They were like, you know, you can do anything. Why do you want to go infantry? And I was like, I told you why. I want to go fight. You know, they said infantry is full, so the next best thing was artillery. And because, you know, I was smart, they put me into, I was a scout observer. And, you know, when I was leaving boot camp, I was like, scout observer, what's that? But it ended up being the best thing ever, right? You know, you get to go on a hill and locate targets and call in artillery strikes on them and blow stuff up. And then eventually, because of the collateral damage of artillery, a lot of civilians being taken out because of artillery fire and stuff, they started shifting towards precision guided munition, laser guided bombs and stuff during the Afghan-Iraq war, just because there was less collateral damage from those. We got to go out to like Nellis Air Force Base and, call in 2,000-pound bombs from A-10 Warhogs, huge bombs that just shake the earth and have mushroom clouds, and training up to go to Afghanistan. And I got paid to work out twice a day and blow stuff up, which, for any guy is a dream job. I remember when we were at Camp Dwyer, we were playing spades, and the alarm went off for incoming mortars. All of us look at our cards, calmly put them down so nobody knows what we have in our hand. And except for Martin, he throws his cards in the air. This is my radio operator. Throws them in the air, dives under the rack, and come to find out it was just like, a test drive, not actual incoming mortars. That was just the first day at Camp Dwyer. The next day they flew us in by helicopter to our patrol base. And, this is like where the action is, the front lines. And I remember getting off the Super Stallion, the CH-153, and walking off the back and, thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm actually in country, I'm in combat. If you've ever seen one, it's just it's a big helicopter. So you have the Chinook, which is the one with the two props on top. The Chinook just has one, but it's really big. So it's basically a troop transport, and you get off the helicopter and you walk, and we're in the base, and that's it. But it wasn't until the first time I was getting shot at, like when you're at the rifle range, qualifying for your rifle in the military, you're down in the pits. Like, people go down in the pits and they pull the targets, and you put the targets up, and you hear the snapping sound of the bullets flying by as they're shooting the targets, right? And you pull them down and you mark it and stuff like that. The first time I heard that sound going this direction past me, that's when I was like, when it really hit me, like, oh, I'm in combat. Like, I'm actually at war, and I can die. I'm being shot at. And I've had a few times. I've had I'm in the prone position, and a bullet hits right in front of my face, and the dirt comes up and hits me in the face, and you think to yourself, and anyone who knows anything about guns, like, the difference between that and hitting my face is so small. The difference in how fast they pulled the trigger, or their breath, or whatever the case is, right? But yeah, it was, I saw a lot of intense things. There's things that, you kind of expect in war, and then there's things that you don't. And I think those are the ones that stick with you. We had, there's a village that we would get intel from, and, we'd give them money to repair the roads and help the locals out, and, in exchange they'd give us intelligence. And the Taliban had found out, and they placed an IED on the doorstep of the village elder's house. But instead of him, his wife stepped on it and blew both her legs off. And they brought her to us, and, I just remember putting tourniquets on this, 40-something-year-old woman's legs while she's screaming for her life, bleeding all over the place. So just calling in the LZ brief and having the Army, medic helicopter come and pick her up, and that's it. You don't know what if they make it, if they don't, they just, you just carry on with the mission. It was October of 2010 to May of 2011. This is Operation Enduring Freedom, the Afghan war. So if you look at statistically, 2010 and 11 were the two deadliest years in the entire war. It's kind of hard, because I think the way I've, come to deal with things is I try to make them funny, I remember we're trying to close the gap between where we were and where they were, and there's this town of Durzai that was still like heavily Taliban infested. SEAL teams were still doing covert ops in that town, and it was Operation Augusta 2, and basically we're doing like census operations, right? We just go on patrol and see what the locals think about us being there, but it's really trying to find like Taliban people. And you dig they call it like a ranger grave. You dig a little hole in the ground and sleep in it just in case they drop mortars. You're below the line of the ground. Increases your chances of living. And so we set up this coil out in the desert, and we're patrolling from that. And after we leave like 05 in the morning, and somewhere around like 10. We noticed like 60 women and children leaving this village, which is like a telltale sign that they're about to attack us. And so I say to the officer that's leading our patrol, I said, "Sir, I think we're gonna take contact. We should take cover." And we take cover behind like some hay stalks or whatever, and we decide how we're gonna split up our teams. A few seconds later, we started getting shot at. And so my team, we went north and then proceeded to attack them, heading west. And then the other team, they went south. But the worst job in the Marine Corps is combat engineers, because these guys would have metal detectors looking for IEDs. And their job while we're in a firefight is to clear a path for us. So we would lay down cover fire. They'll get up, sweep a couple feet, and then go back in the prone, lay down more cover fire, and they just keep doing that. They're just walking towards the enemy, shooting at us with a metal detector, making sure there's no IEDs. And the intel from the night before told us this berm that we're about to cross, there's an IED every foot. And to me, that was probably the worst part about combat. I would take getting shot at any day, like, because you know where it's coming from, right? You can respond to that. But taking a step, and every step you're thinking is, and you kind of have to not think about it, but knowing in the back of your mind that every step that you take could be your last. There's ways that we can identify if there's an IED somewhere, and we fall in a straight line, on a clear path. But we had guys just step 1 foot off of the path, and that's it. Wow. And they're not stupid either. The Taliban, they would put a pressure plate all the way 100 feet away from the IED, so you step on it, but you blow me up in the back of the patrol. But yeah, so we're in that firefight, and we didn't have, my team didn't have a guy with a metal detector, but we worked with the Afghan National Army. So I just told the Afghan National Army guy, I said, "Hey, go that way," and he went over the berm and he didn't blow up. So we were like, all right, great. We know that path is clear. It's kind of like messed up if you think about it, but it's their country. We rather, if someone's going to have to cross this berm and potentially blow up, rather one of them than one of us. Mm. And, that firefight lasts a couple hours. And one of the things about being in a firefight, your adrenaline's so high that it makes you have to, take a crap afterwards. So, and this is kind of how, I make these stories a little funny. I had to poop really bad. And so, we clear the area, and we continue with our mission, and we're heading south towards after we go through this village called the Key Village, and we're heading south towards Durzai. And I turned to my buddy, and, it's like a couple hours later, and I'm like, "Man, if we get into another firefight, I hope we, return to base, because I gotta take one bad." And literally like 3 seconds after that, we started getting shot at again. And I just remember standing there and just cursing at, everybody. Once you start taking incoming fire, everybody goes to the prone position. And I'm just standing there cursing at them, flipping them off. And, I was tired of it. I was like, man, screw this country, screw these people, whatever the case is. And my buddy grabs my flak jacket and pulls me to the ground. And a couple of seconds after that, a remote controlled IED blows up like 20 feet, away from me. If I was standing up, I probably would have died. And yeah, so that was crazy. We split into 3 teams, assaulted the target. Eventually, I remember one of the guys has it's a Mark 32. It's a 6-round grenade launcher. I remember him standing up, and there's 5 guys egressing from the village. And I just remember him standing up and unloading all 6 rounds on top of them, and the dust clears, and they're gone. We go through a couple houses. We detain this one guy who had like turban hair because his turban was gone, and he's all sweaty, and he has like brand new Vans on, which was like a telltale sign that they're Taliban. Like they would have new shoes, because usually people would have like sandals or no shoes at all. And he's like swearing he's not Taliban, even though he found like all kinds of guns and weapons in his house and stuff. And at this point, I have to take a dump, and I turn to my buddy. I'm like, man, you got a wag bag? It's this black bag that you would poop in, and you put in another bag and you throw it into the burn pit. And he goes to give me one, and the sergeant leading the patrol is like, hey, we gotta wrap up and get out of here. We're outside of our AO, our area of operation, because the SEAL team was still operating in the village. We just closed with the town Durzak because we were taking fire from there. So we go and we set up in a little 360 prone coil waiting for further instructions. And at this point, we're like 10 kilometers from our little coil in the desert. And it's like, I don't know, 7 o'clock at night. Sun's starting to go down. And finally we get instructions to return to base. And it's like probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And we're doing a debrief. And because I was, my team was attached to the infantry unit, so I would always be a part of the debrief because I was the one that would call in the airstrikes, artillery, mortars, whatever. And as soon as we got back, I went in the back of the 7-ton, and I'm taking my dump, and the CO, he's like, Corporal Lassard, like yelling for me. He's like, where are you? Because they're doing the debrief. And I was like, sir, with all due respect, I've been getting shot at all day. I've had to take a dump for how many hours. I was like, I'm gonna take this SHIT, and he's like, good to go, carry on. And that was it. I finally got to take my dump, and then we went and did the debrief. And but yeah, that that's just how it was. Missions like that, firefights. Our unit specifically, we lost, his name was Corporal Chad Wade. I didn't know him too well. He was just from 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Division. I was with Gulf Company. He was with Echo Company. But we were very fortunate that in Gulf Company, me specifically, because we would get attached to different patrols because the nature of our job, calling like airstrikes and stuff, that we never lost anyone when I was on patrol, but we did lose some Marines. And I think even one of our units lost like 20 Marines in the first month that we were there, that they had to like pull them out and put another unit in. So yeah. In the moment, like in combat, whenever you lose a brother, it kind of motivates you to execute the objectives more efficiently and effectively. But oftentimes you're not thinking about it. We train so much to a point where we're machines, man. Like this is something that we trained nonstop, tirelessly for, that when it happens, you just go, and that's it. There's no thinking. You don't have time to think. you have to make a decision. You have to make it quick, and you have to own it and go all out, because if there's any hesitation, that's life or death. Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine growing up in that. You know, that would be tough. You know, 9-10 years after we had gotten bin Laden is when we finally pull out of the Afghan war. Well, my theory, just my opinion, is that these contracts that the government bids, that a lot of these, you know, people in politics have stakes in, have stock in these companies, have all that stuff, right? They say, great, we got bin Laden, war's done, we've solved our, you know, we've completed our mission, let's get out of there. And then, you know, the higher up and, you know, the Senate and stuff like that, they go, whoa. We have this 10-year contract with Lockheed Martin. We have this 5-year contract with General Atomics. We have this 10-year contract to make all these things, right? When I went there in 2010 is when they first started making the MATVs, the MATVs, which was like the new generation of Humvees with the V-shaped hole. So if an IED blows up, it doesn't destroy them. They just started producing them. When I went there is the first year that we started using those instead of Humvees. So we got this 10-year contract to make all these vehicles. We can't end the war now. If we end the war now, then you know, what are we going to do with all these things that we're making? We have this contract for another 5-10 years. We gotta make our money on this, right? And so they just, you know, keep the war going for another 5, 6, 7 years, make their money off all these contracts. Again, it's my theory, or, you know, just my opinion from what I've seen and how it works, you know, these government contracts, because war is very lucrative. It's where it's the only industry where the overhead is human lives. You know, an IED blows up 20 feet away from you, it's going to affect you. You know, if you have an IED blow up 20 feet away from you, it's going to affect your body. Because my job falls under artillery as a scout observer, we would shoot the bigger weapons, you know, the 50 cal and the Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers. And so on the MATVs on top, there's a turret, and usually the lead vehicle will have a 50 caliber on it, and then, you know, the next one will have a Mark 19, and then a variation of other things depending on how many vehicles. Usually the first and the last are 50 cals, and then, you know, some Mark 19s in the middle. You know, you go down the road, and there's a hole in the road every, you know, 5-10 feet from an IED blast, of just, you know, IEDs blowing up. Usually the lead vehicle would have this like little, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically like an attachment, like a plow attachment, but it had wheels on it that would go before the vehicle. So if it hits like that thing would blow up instead of us blowing up. So yeah, just IED blasts, the rigors of combat, you know, going on hide missions with 50 pounds of gear on you. And yeah, regarding combat, yeah, I have like 10 dB of hearing loss across all levels. Sometimes I'm louder than I realize, you know. And it's funny because you know, they'll say to you, well, how come you didn't put your hearing protection in, you know, while you're in combat? And like, what do you want? Excuse me, Mr. Taliban, can you stop shooting at me for you know, just 10 seconds? I got to put these earplugs in so I don't lose my hearing. Yeah, the hearing is definitely, you know, one of the things that goes. But for me, it was knees and back and several issues. Majority of it was PTSD, you know, my combat related disability. Yeah, I'd have nightmares. Almost killed my ex-girlfriend a couple times. Probably why she's my ex-girlfriend. Voice cracked a little bit. That's probably why she's my ex-girlfriend. You know, it was to the point where after I had come back from combat, I was drinking a fifth of whiskey in like 30 minutes every night just so I can sleep through the night. And, you know, I was still functioning. I would wake up and do, you know, go PT and still do my job and all that. But eventually my command, you know, caught on, and they basically said, hey, you know, get in the truck. We're taking you to, you know, medical to get you some help. And I was like, all right, you know, what am I going to say? And I remember going to the Naval Hospital on over on Main Side on Camp Pendleton and talking to this one therapist, and man, I swear she was crazier than I was. You know, I would tell her these stories from combat, and she had this you know, maniacal laugh that almost made you feel like you weren't that crazy. But I figured, you know, all the stories she's probably heard, you know, probably wears on you a little bit. So either, you know, she was doing it on purpose to make me feel better, whatever it was, it worked, you know, it worked a little bit. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, you know, I started going to the San Marcos Veteran Center. Shout out to them. And I still do that today, once a month. Talk to them. And even though a lot of the conversation has shifted from combat, because I've kind of learned how to cope with that stuff, I just still think it's great to have like a counselor or someone to talk about life issues, whether it's something from combat, marriage, business, whatever area it is in your life. But yeah, we did have drones. We would, there's oftentimes we would just have a drone on station that we would just say, hey, we want to check out this area, and they would just fly along this certain path and surveil these main roads. And oftentimes we would, you know, find a guy that's, you know, putting an IED in the ground, and we'd pass that up to the chain of command, and they'd send some F-18s our way, and we'd drop a bomb on them, and that's it. Yeah, I don't think at that time we had bombs on drones. The technology has come very far since then, specifically in that field, and it's an area that I actually work on now. All right. Yeah, so I met my wife in 9th grade. Her name is Katika Lassard. It used to be Katika Wright. She is 42 days older than me, so she's 35 right now. I'm only 34. So she's robbing the grave with me. She got the young one now. Her parents used to live in the Bronx with her grandmother. And when I was in 9th grade, they had bought a house in Connecticut where we lived in Danbury. And she walked into my 9th grade class, and I stood up from the back of the room and I said, dang girl, you're so fine, come sit next to me. And she went and sat on the other side of the room, because, you know, she grew up in the South Bronx. She never went to school with white people before, and she's like thinking to herself, who's this white boy trying to holler at me? You know, and went and sat, you know, on the other side of the room. And the truth is, according to me, that she liked me so much that she changed her classes so that she could have 6 classes with me. Her story is that she was wanted to take Spanish, but was so bad at it that they switched her back to French, and that switched her schedule up to us having 6 classes together. But I'm pretty sure she just wanted to be in my class. You know, we had broken up, and but we stayed really close friends all throughout high school. You know, we were very close friends. There's times that we had like tried to date again, but it just didn't really work out. And so, you know, after high school, I went to the Marine Corps. She went to college, And my last year in the Marine Corps, I invited her out to the Marine Corps ball. A lot of stuff had gotten said, in those couple of days that we're here. A lot of things that, while I was in the Marine Corps, man, when I was over in Afghanistan, she sent me more care packages and wrote me more letters than everybody in my family combined. And, we were best friends. We still are best friends. We were very close. We told each other everything. And so after that, she went home and I called her, and, a couple weeks later, a month later, or whatever it was. And I said, "Hey, do you want to get married?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "No, seriously." And she goes, "Yeah, you're my best friend. I'm not going to marry anyone else." And I said, "Okay, when I come home in a month, let's get married." And I could kind of tell she was freaking out about that, subsequent conversations later. And so I asked her if she wanted to wait a year because, I was still in the military. She was still in college. And so we waited till the following December, 2012. And that's when we got married. And I remember the day after us getting married, I was helping her finish her thesis paper, whatever her final paper was to finish her degree. And after she submitted that, we packed up her car and we road tripped out to California, and we did a honeymoon, and then we did like a long road trip where we stopped at like all these man versus food places along the way and made a whole trip of it. It was really fun. And yeah, and that's how I ended up here in San Marcos. I got out of the Marine Corps. I was living with a South African couple, and this kind of ties into how I ended up in rugby a little bit too. I was living with a South African couple in Carlsbad, and they used to watch rugby all the time. And they had the one TV, and so I would sit and watch with them, and I learned the sport, I learned the rules and stuff. But I was playing football at Palomar at the time. I didn't play it yet, but I was living with them when I got out of the Marine Corps. So I got out in August of 2012. A week later, I started school at Palomar College. And I was living with them before that, but up until around December of 2012, I had gotten an apartment here in San Marcos, closer to Palomar College, because, I needed a place for us to live and wanted to be close to where I was going to school. Katika, I love you, baby. You're my best friend. You're my partner. There's no words that can express just the journey that we've been through, and what you've meant as my help, my support, my wife, and I love you. I love you so much, babe. So I had met I met my friend Dylan at Palomar College, and he had came from Montana to play football. And that kind of, long story short, got me into football. I played defensive end at Palomar College, but I didn't play too much because, Dylan was just a much better athlete. His father played in the NFL. He's played football his whole life, and he actually went on to play for the New York Jets. He went from Palomar College to University of West Georgia, and then to the New York Jets. And but I played a season with them, and after that, I was at the basketball courts playing, I forget what the park is here in San Marcos, over on San Marcos Boulevard. But, I played basketball my whole life. Going back to what I was saying earlier, I'm very passionate about it. And I was playing pickup basketball, and I'm just walking back to my car, and this guy goes, "Hey, mate, you're a pretty big fella. You want to play rugby?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a try," because, I lived with the South Africans, and I learned the sport, and, I wanted to try it out. And I thought I was just going to play a pickup game. So I go out there Thursday, and I quickly realized that this is an actual team, because we're like doing drills and stuff. But I had just got done playing football. I'm making tackles, I'm running dudes over and things like that. And the coach is like, "Hey, you're pretty good. Do you want to, you want to come play on Saturday?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I go home and I tell my wife, and I'm like, "I think I accidentally just joined a rugby team." And which she wasn't too happy about, because she never really had a say in that. So sorry, babe. But I loved it, man. It was everything that I loved about football and basketball put together, because, you know, you played both sides of the ball. It was continuous play. It wasn't just, you know, don't get me wrong, football is it's a very difficult sport as well. There's a lot that goes into it. But usually you just play one position. And in rugby, you also have, you know, set positions, but there's a little bit more fluidity to it. And the fact that you play both offense and defense is something that I liked. And I was with that team, the North County Gurkhas, shout out to them, I think for like 3 years. And they were like a D2 team at the time. And one of the coaches for their summer sevens he was a former USA Sevens captain. And he was coaching a team down in San Diego called Usmc, Old Mission Beach Athletic Club, which was a premiership team at the time. And he said, hey, man, you know, you should stop wasting your talent here and come play for this team down in San Diego. And I said, all right. And I went down there, and I think it was either 2016 or 17. And I played for that team for, you know, a few years. And I officially walked away from the game, or retired from the game, in 2023 after we had lost the regional championship in Vegas. But the team's doing great this year, man. They're undefeated. They're like destroying teams by like 50 points. I think they're gonna, you know, they can go and take the national title. And I actually I played rugby last Saturday. You know, I went to the game, and they'll have a B-side game. So, you know, for guys who are new, who are like developing, they have a second game after the main game for them to get, you know, live playing time to develop their skills. And my son had said he wanted to see me play, and my wife was like, you know, do you want to play? And I was like, yeah, I'm down to play. And it was nice to get on the field again. I scored 2 tries, had stole the ball like 4 times, you know, made a lot of good plays. It was against a B-side team, so you know, I should have done that with, you know, my experience playing. But I definitely felt it the next day, all the hits and everything that comes with a rugby game. But yeah, I think for me and where I was at that point in my life, it was definitely an outlet of anger, of things that I still hadn't dealt with at the time. And I think most contact sports, for me, that's kind of what it was. There may have been like a little bit of like self-punishment in that, because of like the things that I was doing at the time that weren't right. You know, my wife and I got married when we were 22. The first year was good. It was like honeymoon phase, but we both had a lot of like childhood trauma and adulthood trauma. You know, some of the things I spoke of, you know, with combat, things from my childhood. You know, I tried to tell her stuff from combat, and she'd, you know, look at me like I was a monster, and, you know, understandably, because, you know, the way I was saying things, you know, the aggressiveness and stuff like that. You know, I'm not a small person either, so and both of us trying to just work through things. And you know, I was playing football, going out and partying with the football team, doing drugs, drinking. And then even when I was playing rugby, you know, I would go out and drink and come home wasted. You know, I would throw up in the toilet, just most of the time on purpose, so I wouldn't have to wake up hungover. And I was basically doing anything and everything that I could to avoid reality. I'd play video games for like 8-9 hours straight, just to not deal with, you know, the PTSD from combat, to deal with, you know, a lot of these unresolved things that I had. I would do anything I could to numb out the world, whether it's drugs, alcohol. She was like, that's it. You know, we're going to church. And so here I am thinking we're going to church for her. And in that moment, Jesus encounters me like never before. And, you know, I really, from my heart, gave my life to Christ. And over the next 3 months, both of us had healed from so much that we decided to get pregnant with our son. Writing this book wasn't even on my radar. Like, I had zero plans to write a book. I actually had been reading The Holy Spirit by Dr. Rodney Howard-Brown. and the anointing on that book is ridiculous. While I was reading it, the Holy Spirit just dropped this idea in me, and I ran with it full speed, because I've learned, when the Holy Spirit tells you something, you got to obey. And, he's doing it to bless you, to build you up, to open up doors for you, things like that. And it's been incredible. The name of the book is The First Flame, Awakening of the 12. It's a historical fiction on the book of Acts. So it basically takes you through the full book of Acts from the New Testament. It's the first one in the series. It's gonna be a series. There's gonna be more like it, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited about what it's gonna ignite the fire within people to continue the message of Christ. And at the end, in the about the author, I put a prayer of salvation just for anyone who reads it, who feels convicted to just pray the prayer and give their lives to Christ.
So you said it's something fiction. What was it again? What was the word?
It's a historical fiction.
What does that mean? Because I've never heard that before. What is historical fiction, and how did you write it in that format?
So, right, fiction means something that's not true. Nonfiction means something that is true. The Bible itself is nonfiction. It's history. It's truth. It's things that actually happen. Some people may debate that, but the Bible is very true. The reason this is classified as a historical fiction is because creative liberties have been taken to make it into a novel, to dramatize the story of the book of Acts, to make it more of a smooth read through for someone who isn't an on fire believer, someone who's serving the Lord, disciplined in the faith, on fire for Christ, can open the Bible, read it no problem, and have no issues with that. But for some people, it's difficult to read through the Bible and have the discipline to do that. So it makes it more, relatable. It turns it into this story of what happened versus just scripture of things that people said. I think the main reason why someone would read it is to get an understanding of Christianity, of how it started, why it started, and what kind of led it to what it is today. Some point, everybody has to lay down at night and put their head on the pillow and answer the question, why am I here? What is my purpose? Everybody does that at some point in their life. And this is kind of an entryway into people learning what started the Christian church, how did it happen, what were the events in the beginning, and it tells it in a way that's a story format that would entice someone to keep reading, to keep learning, to maybe open up the Bible and understand more of what was said, more of what was what had happened, and ignite that flame within them to learn more about Christ and to give their life to Him. I went to Zimbabwe in 2023. Went to Nigeria with them this past November, and we've seen amazing things. They told us in Nigeria, the place that we went to, Ashodi, nobody has gone there in 40 years because it's the most violent area in Lagos. That just in the last year alone, in 2024, there was 200 murders in that area. I think a lot of people have made it into this religion, in the sense that you got to go here and you got to do this and you got to do this and do it that way. And religion is man's failed attempt to reach God with what Christ has already solved by relationship. And it's about relationship with Christ. Yes, you still have to go to church because we're commanded to in the Bible. It says not to forsake the gathering, because it's the anointing of God that makes following Christ and Christianity easy.
Is there any question that I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
I think we covered the whole gamut. I would just love to pray for you and for your business, and leave off on that.
Let's do it.
All right. Father, I thank you for Victor. I thank you for Ricky, and I thank you for all this time just to gather before you and be in your presence to share the testimony of my story. And Lord, it says in your word that everything that you put your hands to is blessed, and everywhere that your feet tread is holy ground. So I declare that over Victor. I declare that over his family. I declare that over his business and every single person that works here, that every single thing that they put their hands to is blessed. That they would just take seriously the work that they do, that they would do exceedingly excellent work, and that you would bless his business, that you would pour out a blessing that he wouldn't even be able to handle, that you would even multiply him this year, that he would see just growth in his business that he wasn't even expecting. And even on this podcast, Father, we thank you that you've given him a heart to steward everything that you've given him. And it says, he who is faithful over little, that you will give him even that much more, that you will allow him to steward even that much more, that he will be faithful over the much, that he'll be faithful over the plenty. So I just declare that over his life. And Lord, I pray a long, healthy, and prosperous life. It says, whatever you loose on earth is loose in heaven. So Lord, right now I loose angels from heaven to minister to Victor, to his family. I just declare favor over his life. I declare a long and healthy life. It says we can live to 70 to 80 years if we're in good health, up to 120. Lord, I declare that you would live to 120 if that's his will, that you would give him a long life filled with love and peace. In the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
I'll take it. I don't know about the 120 though.
I want to live to 120, man. I want all the years. There's work to do.
Show the book. Let us know where we can find it. Name of it.
The First Flame, Awakening of the 12. It's on Amazon. You can. There's a paperback version, which I see, which is what I'm holding here. There's a hardcover and a Kindle version. If you go to the Kindle version, you can sample the first 4 chapters of the book for free. Decide if you like it. Also, 50% of the proceeds are going to be sown into good soil, which is Revival Today, Fervent Faith Missions, or Elisha Revolution. Churches that are sharing the gospel, that are doing mission trips, that are feeding hungry children across the world. And then the other 50% is for taxes for me and just things that I want to do, go on mission trips, but it's going into the kingdom. And this is actually a limited edition that I'm going to give you today because I changed the cover. So you can no longer get this edition anymore. But I brought 2 for you, signed copies for you and Ricky, just to bless you guys as a thank you for having me.
Nice.
This episode is sponsored by Centric Auto Repair. Is your check engine light on? Need brakes? Trust the experts at Centric Auto Repair. To ensure your vehicle is running smoothly and safely, call today.